something I want to work on for a while. I wanted to celebrate one of my favorite franchises of all time, Power Rangers. And because of its 20th anniversary, I decided to actually go through the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis and review every single game that is on those systems. So, before we get started with this, let me take you to a special trip to one place I know called Japan.
In 1975, a series began with collapsed helmet, spandex wearing super team series known as Super Sentai, or Super Squadron as you know in America. It started off in the beginning with Hibitsu Sentai Go Ranger, and after 16 years it evolved into Kuru Sentai Ju Ranger, which of course everyone knows that, and by a guy named Haim Saban, who while taking his business trip in Japan, decided to take this show and adapt it into the franchise that we know as Power Rangers. Even though the franchise has their ups and downs, but it's still going strong even to this date.
Now for every franchise there has to be video games, and based off the first season, we have Mighty Morphin Power Rangers on the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. We're going to mostly focus on the Super Nintendo version.
First off, the opening looks incredible, and it's awesome to hear the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers theme with actual lyrics. It sounds really good on the Super Nintendo. Now for the story, it takes place around during Season 1. Briefly. Let me explain this in a nutshell. Two astronauts landed on the moon and found a strange dumpster. Hence the title of the first episode, Day of the Dumpster. They decided not to radio in what they found, but they decided to open it to release Rita Repulsa and her gang of baddies. For her coming out party, she decided to take on destruction on the first planet she ever sees, Earth. Zordon of Altar, the giant floating head in the tube, has to find 5 teenagers with attitude to become the Power Rangers to combat her. For her last resort, she decided to bring in the destruction of Cyclopses on Angel Grove, which is the city where the Power Rangers live. But the way to cut this short, Cyclopses is defeated, Rita left Earth, the Rangers celebrated with their victory at the Youth Center where they hang out in almost every single episode that they are in.
Whoa, putting a 40 episode season into one cartridge, well, that can be a bit complicated. But I've been thinking about the Super Nintendo. Can they actually accomplish it? Well, let's find out.
First off, the game is styled as a side-scrolling beat-em-up game. At least this one isn't frustrating hard. Oh bullshit! Up to the last 2 stages, it changed the style into a fighting game with the Megazord itself. It's not that terrible, but it's not that bad anyway. For the beat-em-up controls, Y is your basic attack. Pressing it multiple times will actually pull a combo. Getting close to your enemies will cause you to throw them to the ground. Speaking of which, by executing a ground attack, you actually just hold duck with the D-pad. In Ranger form, when you press X, you can activate a powerful bomb. It's also really good when you fight the monsters of the level. So I decided that you should actually save it up to that point. For the Megazord fights, walking, jumping, and fighting is at the same controls, but most of the attacks are actually used with the Power Sword. And of course, there's also some special attacks that you can get from the little meter on the bottom. Oh, but wait, but what is the jump button? Well, to cut this short, almost every Super Nintendo game actually uses the B button to jump. That's it. Before starting each level, you get to choose any of the 5 playable Rangers that are from the series, and each one has their own power weapon. We have Jason the Red Ranger with the Power Sword, Zack the Black Ranger with the Power Axe, Billy the Blue Ranger with the Power Lance, Trini the Yellow Ranger with the Power Daggers, and finally Kimberly the Pink Ranger with the Power Bow. Now you might be thinking, why isn't the Green Ranger in this game? Well, if I had to give an answer, I will say that the game wants to focus on only the 5 main Rangers, and it's kind of difficult to put the Green Ranger in because he wasn't in the Season 1 finale, instead of that little small cameo he did towards the end. Each Ranger has different kinds of fighting styles, but in their Ranger form, they all have the same kind of fighting styles, but it doesn't even matter if their colors are palette swapped, but it's still the same thing. And this is why Kimberly doesn't even have a skirt, which doesn't make sense because in the show she is the only Ranger that actually wears a skirt. Now before each Ranger fight, we had to start off in civilian form by fighting the foot soldiers of the series, the Putty Patrollers. Unlike the series where they're all gray, in this game they decided to change the colors to make them more difficult to destroy. But unlike the gray or light green putties which are easy to destroy, these actually give you a little pain. Plus the dark green putties, they keep jumping around like a Mexican jumping bean. Ah, please stop jumping, I want to destroy you! Now don't get me started with the black putties because of that stupid shield they're holding! God, it takes like 3 times to destroy them! But it doesn't matter, once you're halfway through, the monster of the level will appear, and of course, the Rangers are ready to morph.
Mastodon!
Pterodactyl!
Triceratops!
Saber-tooth tiger!
Tyrannosaur!
Now each monster is actually interesting to fight. Each one is featured from an episode from the series, like Bones from High Five, Gnarly Gnome from Different Drum, Eye Guy from Eye Eye Guy, the Genie from Switch Places, and of course the Dark Warrior from, well, Dark Warrior. Defeating each of these monsters will award you a password so you continue where you left off. And of course, for a good game, it's short, sweet, and to the point. Unlike a shitty game where it's just long, I can't get that out of my mind anyway. But after defeating level 5, it is time for what we've been waiting for, the Megazord formation. With the first Megazord fight, we had to fight Mutitus, which of course doesn't make sense because in the show, because he was destroyed with the Ultra Sword instead of the Megazord, but it doesn't matter anyway, he gets destroyed after all. But after that, we had the final climax with Cyclopsis up on the moon. And this guy wants to keep you off guard. He tries to block every single swing and punch you try to give to him, and so he can actually counter. That is freaking annoying! After we thought that we destroyed him, he regenerates with more strength with some one-nail Wolverine cloth. I forgot it. We defeated him, we celebrated the Juice Bar with pointless cameos of Ernie, the manager of the Juice Bar, and the comic relief bullies Bulk and Skull, where they did absolutely nothing in the entire game while the credits roll. Overall, I actually enjoyed this game from beginning to end, and it actually shows me what a Power Ranger fan can really like. The graphics are really good for the time. Each level has some really good designs to roam through, even though they have some platforming elements which I didn't explain, but it's actually more interesting to run through. The controls are so smooth. This is the best controls I've ever played for a beat-em-up game. They're so responsive enough and it feels so satisfying. And of course, the music is awesome. Each level has a different kind of flavor and environment, including the boss themes, which sounds really good too. Plus, oh come on, the main Power Rangers theme on the Super Nintendo sounds really good, and for a cartridge-based game, it actually has some real vocal lyrics in this game. Yeah, I know, I already talked about this earlier, but seriously, this is unheard of before. For some hardcore Power Rangers fans, I would say I will definitely recommend you to get this game for a long shot. Just pick it up, try it out, and you'll be pleased with the results. Now before I end this review, let's take a look at the Sega Genesis version. I can skip the story because it's exactly the same, so let's move on with the gameplay. First off, it's an ordinary fighting game of course, but what sucks is it only has 2 buttons to activate throughout the entire game. In most fighting games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, they have a variety of buttons to choose from. And for the other gameplay element, we can actually play as the Green Ranger and of course the Dragon Zord for the giant monster fights. Now that's pretty cool. Now the monsters are very different from the Super Nintendo version. We got the Minotaur from Teamwork, Madame Woe from Peace, Love, and Woe, and the Gorilla Knight Goldar. He works with Rita Repulsa, but in every Zord fight he runs away like a pussy. But before every Zord fight, we get these cutscenes that we can see the Zords forming the Megazord, or the Green Ranger summoning the Dragozord from the ocean like the Godzilla films. Therefore, the ending is the same. The final boss is Cyclopsis. We destroy him in both forms. Titanus the Carrier Zord makes his cameo appearance, and the credits show the full cutscene of the Megazord formation. There's not much to say about this one. This game is alright, but I don't know why it's actually completely different from its competitor. First off, the graphics looks okay for the Sega Genesis. One thing that is odd is that the Rangers all have the same animation and design. Same flaw as the Super Nintendo version. The Megazord design looks really good, so does the Dragon Zord. But the one flaw that I really don't like throughout this entire game is the music. The music in this game sounds like nails on a chalkboard, and the voice recording, my god, it makes my ears bleed a river. Jesus, that hurt! I'm really getting more love for the Super Nintendo version. At least that one did it right. Besides the flaws, this game is okay. If you're really a Sega nut, by all means play this game. But if you really want a good Power Rangers game, get the Super Nintendo version. It's really worth your time.
Well anyway, that was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The Super Nintendo outshines the Sega Genesis version. I don't know what Sega was thinking. It's just, even though that Green Ranger is in the game, and of course that there are different kinds of monsters, but they're too cheesy in this one. But I say the Super Nintendo has the best monsters in the game. So, for all that, the Super Nintendo version beats the Genesis version. So, next on our list is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie. Do you think that Sega will actually make a comeback with this one? Well, stay tuned and find out.